Okay, so today we're diving into something um, I think we all experience pretty much every day. Bickering. Those little disagreements. Those back and forth snipes that pop up. Well, any relationship, really. We're going to unpack. Why these seemingly small spats might actually be a much bigger deal than we realize. And for this deep dive, we've got a fascinating mix of sources. We've got this blog post from the University of Rochester Medical Center's Employee Assistance Program, some wisdom, from the relationship therapist Esther Perel. And to ground this all in reality, we're going to be peeking into a Reddit thread where women are discussing their own bickering battles. So get ready for some surprising insights because we're going to cover how bickering can be a symptom of deeper issues, how those little criticisms can actually be veiled cries for connection, and what real couples are doing to navigate these choppy conversational waters.
It's interesting how we often dismiss bickering as just like this normal part of being in a relationship. But the You Are Medicine article really frames it as a problem that needs to be addressed.
Yeah. Right off the bat, they're saying, hey, this isn't just a quirk. This is something that can have serious consequences. And they even suggest this exercise where you actually list out all the negative effects of bickering.
I think that's such a powerful exercise because it forces you to confront the ripple effects. It's not just about the argument itself. It's about the atmosphere it creates. How do those little disagreements impact your mood? Do they affect how you interact with your kids? Do they lead to unhealthy coping mechanisms? It's like this slow drip of poison that can just like seep into every corner of your life.
Yeah, it makes you realize it's not just about letting off steam. It's about the damage that's slowly accumulating. And speaking of damage, Esther Perel uses this really striking phrase to describe bickering: low-intensity chronic warfare.
I mean, that really captures the essence of it, doesn't it? It's not this big explosion. It's this constant state of conflict that wears you down over time. Each little jab, each little criticism, it chips away at the foundation of the relationship, eroding trust, eroding intimacy.
And this is where Perel's insights get really interesting. She argues that often. Those criticisms, those little digs we take at each other, they're actually masking deeper longings. It's like we're speaking in this code, trying to express a need, but not quite knowing how.
Yeah. Instead of saying like, I feel lonely and I crave your attention, it comes out as, you're always on your phone. Or instead of admitting, I feel insecure and I need reassurance, we snipe, you never compliment me anymore.
Exactly. It's like we're throwing darts, but we're aiming at the wrong target. And what Perel's saying is, we need to decode those criticisms. We need to understand the real message behind the words.
It's a profound shift in perspective. Just imagine, if instead of getting defensive, when your partner criticizes you, you paused and asked yourself, what are they really trying to tell me? What need are they trying to express?
So the next time you hear that familiar criticism, instead of firing back, maybe take a breath and try to decipher the code. What's the hidden message? What's the longing beneath the words? It might just change the entire dynamic of the conversation. Now let's step away from the theoretical for a second and see how this plays out. In real life, we found this Reddit thread where women are sharing their experiences with bickering. And one post really caught our eye. This woman is struggling with her boyfriend's jokes. She feels like he's constantly teasing her, and it's starting to wear her down.
It's a classic example of how different communication styles can clash in a relationship. What one person perceives as playful banter, another person experiences as hurtful criticism. And finding that balance, that shared understanding of each other's sensitivities, it's crucial.
And the advice in the thread is all over the map. Some people are telling her to be more assertive, to communicate her feelings directly. Others are suggesting she try to let it roll off her back, to practice silence and not engage.
It really highlights the fact that there's no one-size-fits-all solution to bickering. What works for one couple might not work for another. It's about finding the strategies that resonate with you and with your partners. Unique dynamic.
And that's what makes this deep dive so valuable. We're not giving you a prescriptive formula. We're giving you a framework for understanding bickering and a toolkit of strategies to try. So as you're listening, think about what resonates with you. What are your bickering patterns? What are those underlying longings that might be fueling the fire? And what are some strategies you'd like to experiment with in your own relationships?
It's about taking these insights and applying them to your own life. It's about being curious about your own patterns and being willing to try new approaches.
And that brings us back to the You Are Medicine article.
Yeah.
And their emphasis on taking responsibility. They recommend keeping a behavioral change log where you track the topic, of the argument, how long it lasted, and what you can do differently next time.
It's such a practical tool. It takes you out of that blame game
Ah.
and puts you in the driver's seat. It's about acknowledging your role
Yeah.
in the dynamic and saying, okay, how can I change my part in this dance? It's about turning those bickering moments into opportunities for, self-reflection. Instead of just reacting, you're taking a step back and saying, okay, what just happened there? What were my triggers? What choices could I have made differently?
So we've talked about identifying triggers and taking responsibility, but how do we actually break free from those ingrained patterns? It's like we're stuck in this rut and we just keep replaying the same argument over and over again.
That's where the pause comes in. Remember, Perel talked about the power of that space between the inhale and the exhale?
Yeah.
That space represents like a choice point. It's a chance to interrupt that automatic reaction and choose a more conscious response.
So instead of just firing back with that same old barb, you take a breath and you think, we have a choice here. I can either escalate this conflict or I can try something different.
It's about creating that tiny gap, that micro moment where you can step out of the reactive mode and into a more mindful space.
But what about those deeper longings that Perel talks about? How do we actually unearth those and communicate them in a way that's constructive, not critical?
That's where vulnerability comes in. It's about being willing to expose those tender parts of ourselves, those needs and desires that we often keep hidden for fear of rejection or judgment.
I think it's so hard for a lot of people, myself included. It feels safer to stay guarded, to protect ourselves with those layers of criticism and sarcasm.
It's understandable. But the truth is that vulnerability is the key to deeper connection. It's about saying, this is what I need, this is what I'm longing for. And it's about creating a space for your partner to do the same.
Pearl uses this example of a woman who criticizes her partner for not taking her hiking. On the surface, it sounds like she's just complaining about an activity, but what she's really expressing is a desire for quality time, a longing to share an experience with him.
So instead of saying, you never take me anywhere, she could say, I would love to go hiking with you sometime. It would mean so much to me to share that experience with you.
It's a subtle shift, but it makes all the difference. It's about expressing the longing, the desire, instead of the criticism. But what if you're doing all this work, you're identifying your triggers, you're pausing before reacting, you're communicating your needs vulnerably, but your partner isn't on board? What if they're still stuck in that bickering cycle?
It can be frustrating, absolutely. And it's important to remember that you can't control your partner, you can only control yourself. But even if they're not actively participating in the change, your own shifts can still have a ripple effect.
So even if they're not changing their behavior, your behavior can still change the dynamic.
It's like throwing a pebble into a pond. The ripples spread outward, influencing the entire system. Your willingness to pause, to reflect, to communicate vulnerably, it creates a new possibility, a new way of interacting that might just inspire them to shift as well.
But what if it doesn't? What if you've tried everything and you're still stuck?
Well, sometimes, despite our best efforts, relationships reach a point where outside support is needed. Remember, the You Are Medicine article mentioned the possibility of seeking professional help.
Right.
That's where a therapist can come in, offering a safe and neutral space to explore those patterns and develop healthier communication skills.
So it's like having a coach in your corner.
Yeah.
Someone who can help you navigate those tricky conversations and break free from those ingrained patterns.
Exactly. Because sometimes we need that objective perspective, that outside guidance to help us see things more clearly and find a path forward. Now, let's circle back to that Reddit thread for a moment. We were struck by the range of advice people offered, from direct communication to practicing silence. It really shows that there's no single right answer.
It's about finding what works for you and your partner. What resonated with me was how many people emphasize the importance of self-reflection. It's
Yep.
not just about changing your partner. It's about understanding your own role in the dynamic.
Absolutely. It's about owning your triggers, your sensitivities, and asking yourself, what can I do differently? How can I show up in a way that fosters connection rather than conflict?
It's easy to get caught up in blaming the other person, but ultimately change starts with us. So we've covered a lot of ground, but before we move on to our final thoughts, I want to leave you with this question. What if there was a way to prevent bickering altogether?
The holy grail of relationships. While we may not be able to completely eliminate disagreements, we can definitely create a more harmonious dynamic where bickering becomes less frequent and less destructive.
I'm all ears. Tell me more.
It starts with cultivating a foundation of mutual respect, appreciation, and open communication.
That sounds like a recipe for any healthy relationship.
Yeah.
But how do we make it happen?
It's about making a conscious effort to acknowledge and appreciate the good in our partner instead of focusing on what annoys us.
Like Perel's suggestion of keeping a list of all the things your partner does that you're grateful for?
Exactly. It's about shifting our focus from what's wrong to what's right. And it's not just about grand gestures, but also those small, everyday acts of kindness and consideration.
Like making coffee in the morning or
Yeah.
taking out the trash without being asked.
Exactly. Those little things add up. And when we feel appreciated, we're less likely to nitpick and criticize. We're more likely to approach disagreements with understanding and compassion.
So it's about creating a positive emotional bank account, filling it up with those deposits of appreciation and kindness.
And when we have a surplus of goodwill, we're better equipped to weather those inevitable storms of disagreement.
This is giving me a lot to think about. Before we wrap up our deep dive into bickering, we'll be back after a short break with our final thoughts on how to transform those everyday squabbles into opportunities for growth and connection. Stay with us. Okay, so we've spent some time dissecting bickering, all those little annoyances that can really chip away at even the strongest bonds, but let's kind of flip the script. Instead of dwelling on the negative, let's talk solutions. How can we transform these bickering battles into something positive?
Yeah, I think it's about reframing our perspective, seeing those conflicts, not as failures, but as opportunities for growth, deeper understanding, shifting from a mindset of blame and defensiveness to one of curiosity and empathy.
That sounds great in theory. But when you're in the heat of the moment,
Yeah.
it's hard to remember those high-minded concepts.
It takes practice for sure. But remember those unmet needs and longings that Esther Perel talked about. Instead of letting those just fester and morph into criticism, what if we address them directly?
So instead of snapping, "You never listen to me," you might say, "I really need to feel heard right now. Can you please put your phone down and give me your full attention?"
Exactly. It's about clearly and directly expressing our needs rather than disguising them as attacks. And it's about being willing to listen to our partner's needs with that same level of understanding and compassion.
Yeah, it sounds so simple, yet it's often the hardest thing to do, especially when emotions are running high.
That's where the pause comes in. Remember the power of that breath, that moment of reflection before we react. It allows us to step out of that fight or flight mode and tap into our higher selves, that part of us that's capable of empathy and reason.
It's like hitting the reset button, giving yourself a chance to choose a different response, a more constructive path.
And sometimes that different path involves stepping away from the conflict altogether. It's okay to say, hey, I'm feeling overwhelmed right now. Can we take a break? And come back to this when we've both had a chance to cool down.
Yeah, walking away can be the most loving thing you can do, both for yourself and for the relationship. It gives you that chance to gather your thoughts, regulate your emotions, and come back to the conversation with a clearer perspective.
And when you do return to the conversation, remember that it's not about winning or losing, but about finding a solution that works for both of you.
It's about collaboration, not combat.
Precisely. It's about approaching the conflict as a team, working together to find a resolution that honors both of your needs and perspective.
Now let's bring in that Reddit thread again. Remember that woman who was feeling overly sensitive to her boyfriend's jokes. One piece of advice that really stood out was to focus on building up your own self-esteem.
That's so crucial. Often our sensitivity to criticism, whether it's intended or not, stems from our own insecurities.
If you're feeling more confident and secure in yourself, you're less likely to take those jokes personally.
Yeah, it's not about becoming insensitive or ignoring your feelings, but about developing a stronger sense of self-worth that allows you to kind of filter out those comments that don't truly matter.
Yeah, that takes work. It's an ongoing journey of self-discovery and self-acceptance.
Absolutely. But it's so worth it. Because when we feel good about ourselves, it radiates outward into all of our relationships. We show up with more confidence, more resilience, and more capacity for love and compassion.
So it's not just about fixing the bickering. It's about investing in ourselves, in our own growth and well-being.
Because ultimately, the health of our relationships is a reflection of our own inner state.
That's such a powerful reminder. So if we want to transform those bickering battles into something positive, it starts with us, with our own willingness to show up as our best selves.
And it's about recognizing that those conflicts, while challenging, can also be catalysts for growth. They can push us to communicate more effectively, to understand each other more deeply, and to build stronger, more fulfilling relationships.
So as we wrap up this episode of Deep Dive, let's recap a few key takeaways. Bickering is often a symptom of deeper issues, like unmet needs and unfulfilled longings, to break free from harmful patterns. Remember to pause, reflect, and choose a more conscious response. Most importantly, taking ownership of our triggers and sensitivities empowers us to change the dance.
And don't forget, those everyday disagreements, they don't have to be relationship deal breakers. With awareness, intention, and a little bit of effort, we can transform those bickering battles into opportunities for growth, connection, and lasting love.
And that's it for this deep dive. Be sure to check out the source material and let us know what you think. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into fascinating topics, expertly curated just for you.